Anyway, should we start?
We should.
Yeah, I'll try and introduce this in a concise and exciting way.
Are you going to give the format out as well?
Oh, no, I'm going to let people guess. Welcome to Talking About. This is a video about something I'm not going to tell you about. I'm not going to tell you how it's going to work. So you stick with it. You stick with it, or I'll come down the screen for you. Hello and welcome to a brand new and very exciting format revamp for Talking About. Yeah, we've had 3 hours of explaining the format to Jason, and we've got it now.
It's going to be.
I'm locked. No, I have.
It's come in.
No, I'm locked and loaded. I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. I'm all over it. I love it.
Honestly, I'd love to see him present the Eurovision when the points start coming. He goes, oh, so everybody's going to vote then, are they?
It's 12 for the lowest one.
So what happens if you phone up about it then? Do you still get points then?
Oh, well, we might have an exciting new format, but it's good that some things haven't changed.
So what happened? So what I'm going to be very concise and very clear for everyone at home here is that myself, James, and Jason have watched a lot of Doctor Who for you all. Actually, that's not true. Me and James have watched a lot of Doctor Who for you, and Jason's joined in with the videos. And so we have given everything a score.
No. I can't agree with that. I've watched them as well. I've even watched the Telesnap reconstructions, unlike somebody else.
Anyway, opinions may vary. So we have previously watched all of these stories. I have been on my Excel spreadsheet and collated the data. I've actually got a spreadsheet. I'm a Eurovision fan. I love a stat. To work out our favorite, as in our 3 top rated stories, and our least favorite, the 3 lowest rated stories for the Sylvester McCoy era. Yeah, so we're going to be looking at the best next time, and the worst this time. Start miserable, end positive. That's like love life. So we're going to just talk through the bottom 3 here, and then we're going to score and see if we still agree with our original decision. And we have brought in the voice of reason. Are we going to call him Ben, the voice of reason, Jolly?
Hello.
Hey!
Yay. It's got to be a special Ben's with us.
Special Ben makes him sound like a takeaway.
Well, if he gets the scoring right, it could be a takeaway here, couldn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Jason gets the scoring right here. It'll be a freaking miracle.
I'm so used to being able to score things in my usual, very, very flexible, and, you know, the manner I score in, nobody ever knows, do they? That's the beauty of it. But this is a very tight structure here, and I'm all over
and I
this.
give it a 7.
I'm all over this. I love this new structure. I'm all over it. I'm ready to go.
Good. So our bottom 3 stories, very sadly, during our reviews of Sylvester McCoy's time, were in 12th position, Paradise Towers on 18 points. In 11th position on 19 points was Ghostlight. And in 10th position on 20 points was Time with the Rani. Greatest Show in the Galaxy missed out on this by half a point. It only got half a point more than Time and the Rani. Only just scraped above it.
I was surprised it wasn't in the bottom 3.
And I'm very surprised that Ghostlight's in that bottom 3 to start with.
I think maybe one of us is more to blame than the others for that.
Well, I gave it a 7 the first time round. I'll have you know, a solid 7 at that as well.
And I gave it an 8, so I'm not pointing fingers.
Ben wasn't scoring with us at the time, so I do wonder who brought that score down.
Who bombed that score in a slightly controversial manner that even when they watched it back, they were a bit like, Crikey, he wasn't in a good mood that day.
It certainly doesn't deserve it, though, honestly. I mean, the story...
We're not going to get there yet, you contrary old queen. Stick with the format, stick with the format.
I'm with it. It's new to me. It's like a pilot episode for us. We'll try and do it all in one go.
Jason's doors are going to start banging, aren't they? We have to keep going back to the recording start.
I'll go from 19 to 2 and 2 to 19.
He'll be sat on a panel in a few years' time saying, "Oh, it was filmed live."
Sydney Newman will be like, get rid of Jason.
I never cut a tape ever.
Right. The first story that so we'll do it chronologically because I think that seems fair and it fits in my method of madness. The first story that we have to look at is Time and the Rani. Now, it's interesting because if you were going to say to someone, what do you think is one of the least popular Doctor Who stories, what one of the least popular, Time and the Rani is probably one of those you'd expect everyone to be saying horrible things about.
Yes.
It's not very highly regarded, and I seem to remember there was some comments after we posted our video from people who said that they thought we'd overscored it, even though it was in the bottom 3.
Yeah, I mean there were. I think, in fact, one of our viewers at the time felt compelled to stop halfway through the video to tell us this is probably the first time that they'd actually completely disagreed with us in our thinking. But yes, it often does poll very low in fan favourites. Or non-favourites, as it would be in this case. But in actual fact, I think, it's not as bad as people have perhaps thought about. And I think also, if I recall, when we reviewed this the first time around, hadn't we come off the back of season 20? Or had we not reached season 20? Because that's always been...
We hadn't reached season 20 by then.
No,
we went from 2 to 20. You're completely making that up, Jason. And
but I told you I'd do it, though. I told you I'd get that in.
Because Time and the Rani, score-wise, I gave it a 7. James gave it an 8. So it was Jason that assassinated this on the score.
Hang on, how can a 6 be an assassination?
It's a 5.
I was quite generally
Give it a 5.
No, I scored it a 6, my dear. I've gone back through and I've had a look at this, and it was a 6.
Did you change your vote halfway through there?
You gave it a 5.
I've got 5 down, unless you can't understand.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. No, I did. I gave it a 5. No, I beg your pardon. Because we've done this out of the order I've got it listed in. I did, in fact, give this a 5. I apologise profusely to all of my fellow companions on this journey. Yes, it was a 5. So I'm the one that threw it under the bus. But I threw it under the bus for a number of good reasons.
You just said it wasn't as bad as people thought it was.
Oh, I'm loving this new
what is going on with these scores?
This new format, I tell you, this is working so well. But a 5 is a reasonably good score, but I think it had some production issues, is what I think I threw it under the bus. I'm having to fill in slightly because they're all crying with laughter the other end of this recording. It has...
Oh, Ben, please be the voice of reason. As you,
Ben, you've not spoken about this. What are your thoughts on Time and the Rani?
Okay, right. Time and the Rani. Well, I remember when I first watched this on transmission. Yes, I'm that old. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? I really hated it. I really did not like it at all. But watching it all these years later, I agree with you guys. I don't think it's as bad as its reputation precedes it. But it's by no means up there with the top ones. It's got a lot of, it's got a lot of problems with it. The plot, for starters, what the hell is that all about? It's just it just doesn't make any proper sense at all. I think Mel is probably the most annoying in this story because I'm certain that she screams more in this story than anything else. And just after a while, it just really grates on you, and you just think, oh, bugger up, you just add enough of that. What else? Blah blah blah. The good points. I think Kate O'Mara is great. she's compared to Mark the Rani, she's now very much glamming it up and, you know, going over the top with her performance. But I think she's good. I mean, she does a great Mel, you know, she's really, really good with that. I think the bubble traps are great. I think the whole effects and stuff with them, I thought they were really impressive for the time. Obviously you probably watch them now and you think, well, it looks a little bit sort of, you know, computer generated type thing. But I like the tech traps as well. I think they work quite well. But a lot of it is just, you know, wandering around in quarries or in studios, and the not the tech traps, sorry, the lacurtions. They're a bit wet, really. You don't really, you know, at the end of it, you just think, well, if they die by these you know, these bees, you hardly even see these tiny little sort of gray video effects coming to get them terrified, and you think, well, I don't really care if they do or not, you know, you don't really feel much for them. So no, yeah, I think it's it's all right. It's not bad. It's not brilliant, but it's not the worst.
I think it's quite a bit of camp fun. I think even the lacurtions, the way they run, it's quite, you know, uber camp. You've got, you know, Kate Mara dressed as Bonnie, you know, in the same sort of jumpsuit, and, you know, even my wig was, well, actually no, if you go back to the original recording, you'll see I did wear a very ropey wig for this one. But I think the thing is, you get into much sort of more complicated and deeper stories as the Seventh Doctor season progresses. This is kind of like Sylv's still finding, you know, it's the first one, he's still finding his feet. There's all these sort of like sayings that he gets the wrong way round, which I do find irritating in this story. It's one of those ones where actually a lot of people will say, I'm watching this just for, not for a serious piece of Doctor Who, it's just for a bit of fun. And I think that's probably, you know, the reason why I scored it the way I did, is it's just fun. There are lots of things that you could poke holes in, absolutely, the plot being one of them, and giant holes there. But actually it is just a you know, a romp.
The funny thing is, saying about Sylvester's thing about getting the Maxims and all that mixed up and all those sort of things, a lot of the Doctors, I think, for those first story or two, have some quirk that they've decided would be great if TV's Doctor Who did this, that as they go through the production, they go, no, that's not great. Maybe Pat Troughton, I think that there was a lot of sort of things that they toned down or changed. And it's interesting because if you think a season at this point, if it was as long as a season was in the 60s, you'd start with Time in the Rani and you get to Greatest Show in the Galaxy or something, you'd have that full run. I'm not saying it would have necessarily panned out in the same way, but I think a first story for a Doctor might suffer in some ways, depending on whether it's very regeneration, and we have sort of discussed the kind of regeneration-centric things, because Time in the Rani's got a sketchy plot, but it's very regeneration focused, and you have lots of kind of, I can't remember anything, and, you know, all that sort of, and I've got to pick my costume for 15 minutes, and I've got to, you know, and all that sort of stuff.
But I think there is an element here. I mean, Sylvester comes in, and it's difficult enough for any new actor coming in and taking the part of the Doctor, and we discussed this previously, coming in and trying to sort of slot into something. This is quite well documented as having been a troubled production, and potentially in this one of the things that lets it down, aside from the effects and the sort of special effects are not brilliant in this story. One of the things I think that's letting it down is potentially a little bit of lack of direction here for Sylvester, and what he needs to try and make out of this, because he really does, in the first couple of episodes, look as if he's really struggling to find his feet. You know, there's not a proper outro, if you like, for Colin. We're straight into Sylvester, and I think this story in particular is probably the worst example of his portrayal of the Doctor. It steps up just towards the end, and as you come into the next few, it just gets better and better and better. But this one, unfortunately, he is struggling with a new role, and I think a lack of some direction in which to take the character.
It's interesting that in our worst three, we also have Ghostlight, which is all, you know, it's real towards the end, where the Doctor is completely different to how he is here. You know, you see him at his darker, more manipulative side of him in that story, whereas here he is a bit all over the shop, to be fair. You know, it's not until towards the end that he starts to come round from his post-regeneration haze and whatnot, and realise what is actually going on.
And I don't think this is Sylvester's fault in any way. You know, it must have been quite daunting coming into studio and trying to take on the lead role in, you know, what was even at that time, you know, a series that wasn't being looked on terribly favorably by the BBC. It had kept being shunted around, and you know, he had to come in and hit this with some force after Colin and, you know, the previous actors that had been before him. What helps him here, I think, is you've got Bonnie already there, but you've then got this amazing sort of performance from Kate O'Mara, who is doing the Rani brilliantly, but she's also playing with this sort of, I'm going to be Mel and try and confuse the Doctor through the plot. And she switches between the two characters just sublime. It's you know, she can be Rani on one side of the set, and she walks across the room and she's Mel, and she just switches into it perfectly. And I think that helps. And I think it helps disguise a little bit of some of the difficulties that Sylvester's probably toying with, you know, because the lines are a bit clunky for him, and he's trying to do those bits of business, and it's all just a bit too. It's not him, it's the direction I think he's lacking. But at least he's got somebody like Kate there who's able to help carry him through the sort of episodes when they're playing together on screen.
I do think the guest cast get a bit of a short straw as well, because I think if you have people like Wanda Ventham and Donald Pickering in, you expect to see, you know, good things, but I think their roles are really quite thankless and quite flat, especially if you compare them to all their other Who appearances, and it's a bit disappointing, really, that, you know, that they sort of got given that. And, you know, I mean, they do the best with the material that they can, but yeah, I was a bit disappointed with that as well.
I think especially Wanda manages to find something underneath the makeup and the strange costume, because she makes you believe she's sad about the skeleton and all that sort of stuff. And there's a lovely little bit, isn't there, when they take the clips off the leg, because she's the first one to have the clip removed from her leg, the bomb thing. And there's a very subtle bit of acting there to say, crikey, thank God I've not blown up. So I think it just feels there's sort of different tones. It doesn't feel like there's a cohesive tone to everything. But I mean, I did watch it when I was a kid, and I was scared of the Tetraps. And I think it does feel, for all its faults, it feels like it's had a rough year doing Trial Over Time, or not quite sure where it's heading, what it's doing, and it feels it's actually punched an air hole and it's heading out to where it wants to go. It's not going necessarily as quickly as it could go there, but it does feel fresh, it feels new. And I think the title sequence, and I love the bouncing bubbles, I think they still look great, the little spin, all that. Yeah. And Andrew's a great director, and I think he obviously comes back and does great things the year after. So I do think there's a lot to like about Time in the Rani. There's just a few kind of, it's that sci-fi shtick, isn't it, when you start talking about time manipulators and pseudo scientific, because you haven't got a genuine sort of peril to lock onto then, have you? Because it's all just sort of sci-fi blah. But I don't think it's an awful thing. I mean, on the stats here, this was Jason's lowest rated Sylvester story. So it's interesting because when you do it in a season run, you don't necessarily put it into a whole context of all of it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So just before we move on to the next one, would you sort of still Well, I suppose we're going to find out with the score, aren't we? But does that ring true for you?
I mean, yeah, having gone through the rewatch of this particular season, this it'll be no surprise, I think, when I come to score this, that this will remain my lowest scored story, and I don't think even after listening to all of the comments that we had when we debated this and discussed this the first time round. So I know obviously you were greatly in support of it. It is a camp thing, and it does work on a number of levels, but it falls flat on a number of levels equally. And I think it struggles, and I can't get past how the interpretation of the Doctor struggles to come to life in this story. It doesn't really start coming to life until you get into the next story and beyond. And it's leaps and bounds after this, but it just struggles. So no, I don't think I've changed my opinion in retrospect as to where I was then. Forgetting my score mix up at the beginning of the video, I still think that this is sitting absolutely firmly in the middle, and I would score it the same way again if I was scoring it.
Yeah, on the same trajectory. This was James's favourite of the whole season. Back fans.
It came. Yeah, it was actually. It was.
Okay. Interesting.
He doesn't want to make further comment on that.
New format.
Because we have another episode in this season to discuss, and I think I remember Jason was like, "Oh, it gets better as each story goes on," and for me, it wasn't really that. The other story we're going to talk about, I feel, had more faults than this one. So yeah.
Because actually James's least favourite McCoy story, drum roll, isn't in our bottom three to contend with. Your least favourite story, according to the stats, is Dragonfire.
Yeah, it is. And again, it's that, I think for me, it's the Sylvester McCoy thing where he's just skidding on the floor. No one else is doing it. It's just like, it was like, oh, I thought it would be a really good idea because we're on ice world, that everything would be slippy. And it's got potentially, because now we've reviewed all of them, I think there are some dodgy cliffhangers, but it's got the most frustrating cliffhanger where he just climbs down his own umbrella. So yeah, that's don't get me started on that again. But yeah, that's why that came bottom of my list for this season.
So anyway, we shall skid onwards. Onwards to the next on our list, which is Paradise Towers. It almost feels slightly brutal, doesn't it? The first two McCoy stories, and we're putting them in the bottom three. Get them out of there.
See, this one, for me, the reason why I scored this low, it is I think we talked about it at the time. The story is still very much along the sort of same lines as Time of the Rani. It's kind of, there's lots of elements to it. It's not yet, Sylvester's not really sort of hit his stride yet. But the big thing for me in this was the Richard Briers performance, which was just, he was supposed to be the main baddie. And I know we talked about stunt casting quite a bit when we were looking at some of these episodes. And it just, you think with Richard Briers, you'd be in very safe hands because he's done so much. He can turn his hand to comedy, he's done serious drama, he's done theatre, and whoever spoke to him or whoever sort of gave him the idea or the notion of how to play Coagnon honestly needs taken to one side because it's quite dreadful. I remember watching this when I was at school, and the cleaners, although they're not necessarily scary, and you sort of think, apart from the claw, how do they manage to get hold of so many people? But the scene when Bonnie was taking a dip in the pool and the sort of robot in the pool sort of grabbed her, I remember that being quite, that was quite drama. But him just walking along the corridor going, kill everybody, get rid of the flesh. It's like,
but who's that down to though? And I mean, you've got to think back. Was he given too much of a free rein as an actor? And he wasn't brought down a peg or sort of directed it strongly, I'd be surprised, because there's been other people cast who were big names who did get their roles and did somehow find the right sort of level for it. Was he undirectable possibly, and that's why you got the performance you got?
So do you know what? In consideration, it's interesting because Nick Mallet does Mysterious Planet, Paradise Towers, and Curse of Fenric. So Mysterious Planet, he woefully directs Joan Sims, who wants to be directed and isn't pushed in the right places. And I feel that for Richard Briers. But then you come to Curse of Fenric, and you've actually got quite a high-end cast there. And it is a question of them either hitting the right performance, because that's how they're hitting the right performance, or is that how he's pushed them into it? Experience the first two stories would suggest, is it more luck than design? But then it's really well shot. So, Fenric we've got to discuss anon, but I take the same thing. Is Richard Briers giving a bad performance because he's not being directed, or is he giving a bad performance because he's not taking the direction? Ben, you haven't discussed. Do you build high? Are you ice hot with it, or do you think it's a flop?
I'm afraid that Paradise Towers is one of my least favorite Doctor Who stories of all time. I remember watching it as a teenager and thinking, what is this shit? I really did not like it. I'm sorry. I know there's lots of fans out there who go, oh, I love Paradise Towers, it's wonderful, and this and that. I can see where they were trying to go with it. Is it High Rise? J.G. Ballard, High Rise? I think it was the sort of the rough idea for it, sort of make it like that. And that's the thing, they could have made it. They could have filled it like, made it really dark and filled it with really sort of dark dripping corridors and really sort of scary people coming out. But then some of the first people you meet are the Kangs, and it's just like a gang of kids, just walked onto the set and they said, okay, you've not really got much acting experience, just, do your best. And they just sort of skip about and stuff, and they're just not threatening at all. It's really embarrassing, and all this thing, the greeting thing, and I'm thinking, oh my god, are they going to do this every time they go and see someone? I just think, so no. You've already mentioned, James, about Richard Briers. Yes, he really needed to be reeled in a lot and just told, look, you're going over the top with this. I just feel like everyone, I think Tilda and Tabby are probably the best in the story, but I think everyone is pitching it as though, I know this is the thing, right? Here we go. The whole Doctor Who is a children's program, right? Which a lot of people say. A lot of people also disagree, and they say, well, no, it's a family program. It's a drama, whatever. But I think at this point, at Paradise Towers, it really, it's like the whole cast think, yes, it's a children's program. They're almost playing down to the audience like, boys and girls, the Doctor's very naughty this week. He didn't do this or he didn't do that, and watch out for the scary monsters, And I think everyone's sort of like, even the bit where was the Rosleys, where they said, oh, we're very sorry for what we did, and we won't do it again. And they're almost like they're talking like the little children watching. Don't be frightened, little children, of this. And it just seems like it's completely brought it down. It's just like, am I just watching, a play school or Sesame Street or something like this, where they're really sort of talking down to the audience? And I just did not like it. And I find very little in it to like it. Even after all these years, when it came out on Blu-ray, I thought, right, I'm going to give it another chance. And I was just watching and thinking, oh, I just find it really cringeworthy. I'm sorry. I just really don't like it. And I just find very little to like about it.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I know, as a little me, I would have been 5 when this went out, and I was scared of it, and I was scared of the cleaners and the corridors and all that sort of stuff. As an adult me, and looking what I scored this, looking at what I scored it, I think I overscored this. I think I gave it a 5. I think it's probably more on the 2-3 section. I really don't like it, and I thought because actually coming into this new format, I had a look back at. I actually watched the episodes to check, where I was at on. I looked at the sort of video reaction. It's just, I just there's it's like Benson. There's just so little to find to like it. The story makes literally no sense. It is literally a senseless story. I agree. Tabby and Tilda, I think, are great, and they're the fine line of comedy and grotesque and murderous, and I mean, they're fantastic actresses. Hurrah that they pitch that credit. Then Judy Cornwall comes in, and it's like she's been asked to do play days or something, and that awful. And it's I think I might mention that awful cringy thing where they talk about doing the nets for the cleaners, and they put the it's just horrible. It's just horrible. So yes, I think I know. God, it's not like it's been 20 years since we did the reviews. I think I overscored this, and I'm willing to say that I overscored this, and I do think it's possibly as bad as Doctor Who gets, excluding anything that's come post End of Time. I mean, I'd still rather watch this than The Girl Who Lived and Died and did all that stuff. I still watch this over that.
Oh, I can't wait till we get to that season.
I think I'm going to have to do fractionals. This is a 0.25. This is a 0.75. But I mean, the cleaner robots, I mean, the weird thing is they are rubbish insofar as, that you have to push your neck into the claw to get there. They look great, don't they? I mean, when they used to have the one at Longleat before they set fire to it, it looked great, even if it's desperately impractical. I know people are all quite excited that they're going to get their Eagle Moss toy now, aren't they? Because they've started to come out in the world. It's difficult, isn't it? I think if you were, and the world's different now, but if you were doing a program in 2001 and you had to mention Doctor Who, you would have picked a pithy clip from this and had something, because there's a lot you could pull out from this. Kangs possibly are one of the worst elements of it, because it's a strange thing of it's very difficult to have adults playing childlike, isn't it? That Dennis Potter sort of adults being children thing. I always find a bit creepy anyway, but it should be disconcerting, and it just comes across as they've just learnt the lines. No. Anyway, we've assassinated Paradise Towers. So we move on to the third and final offering in the worst of Sylvester McCoy, and that is Doctor Who and the Ghost Light.
Oh, why is this in the bottom three?
Well, this is not on your life. Should this be anywhere near the bottom three? And I again, when I heard the scores back on this one, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but this wasn't a story I got the first time round, and it's taken me a while to appreciate, I think, where this story sits. And I scored, I'm just double checking so I wouldn't want to give the wrong score, but I scored this a 7 the first time round, and I stand by that score, because there's a sense of drama, heightened drama in this one that is prevalent throughout. And we're getting very much to that dark end of Sylvester and his sort of era of the Doctor, and he's using, Ace very much. You almost feel like she's a pawn in a game that he's trying to play. And then you've got the sort of the story that comes out underneath it. And it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it absolutely stands its own ground when you compare it to the other two stories that we've shortlisted in the worst of.
But it didn't stand up to the others in the season for you because it was your least favourite for season 26.
Yes, but season 26 has got some very good stories in it. And there are several that are fighting for attention there. And
there's 4 of them.
Yeah, well, okay, 4 of them, but it doesn't make it any less good only because it was my least scored story of that season. It's just how the scores went. We've had some seasons where I haven't scored under a 7 for we've had some seasons where I've scored 0 for a story. It doesn't make, I think deservedly so when I'm giving it 0s and 1s. I think it doesn't deserve the bottom 3 is what I would say. I'm not saying it's peak or pinnacle. I'm just saying it doesn't deserve bottom 3.
Ben, are you a fan of Doctor Who and the Ghost Light?
Yes, I am. I like it. As Jason said, I don't know. You just cannot. You can't compare it with Time in the Rani and Paradise Towers. Way down here, Ghost Light's way up. So much better than that. I don't really know why it's sort of plonked in with these two. I could certainly name several other contenders of Sylvester's season that should be in here and not Ghost Light. But anyway, so we're talking about Ghost Light. So yeah. Again, this is when I first saw this, I was like, I don't really understand what's going on, like most people. It is a very, very complicated story. And it's true, you do need several watches before you can actually get, now I know what's happening. It also probably helps to see some of the scenes that were cut out as well. Sometimes they give little sort of clues here and there, and you think, okay, that's this and that's that. I think everyone gives great performances. I think that really helps because because obviously actors make it, don't they? And they really give their all with the parts. And I don't really think there's any bad performances. I know at the time, John Halloran's Light came in for a bit of shtick just because of his funny high voice, So, but yeah, it was just. I think otherwise, I think everyone else is great. I think it's just the whole complication of the plot thing, which sometimes people maybe score it less. But otherwise, no, I really like it. It's great. It's sort of tinged with a bit of sadness, knowing that this was the last classic story ever recorded. So you think, this is sort of how it sort of all ended, but yeah, I think it's good. I really like it.
Okay. No, I was just saying. Well, it's been alluded to, and I'm happy to deal with the elephant in the room here. That the reason the Ghost Light is in the bottom 3 here is because I scored it 4 points.
Ooh.
Yeah. Which we'll have days, don't we? I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because maybe I was on my period. I don't know. It's funny because I'm a Gemini. I can find things that I love one day and then I don't like them the next. I can find people I like 1 minute and not the next. Jason, I didn't specify you. It could have been Donovan.
Oh.
Yeah, obviously.
I don't get it.
So actually, I mean, the funny thing was because I was watching, because as I said, I watched the episodes back to come into this, and I watched Time in the Rhine. I was like, it's all right. I quite like it. I like Kate and all that stuff. I watched Paradise Towers, and I wanted to smash the glass and eat it. And then I watched this, and I just instantly felt quite guilty. I was like, oh. And do you know what? Actually, I'm not going to entirely right. I think it's probably, in fairness, more a 7 in my schematic than a 4. I think I'm just being a bit Simon Cowell there. And there's lots of lovely performances, and there are lots of really good performances in it. But what I would say, and I think I probably did say it on the original, is that it does fail badly because, yes, I understand the plot because I've owned the video, I've owned the DVD, I've read the book, I've seen the interviews, that's marvelous, and I can do that because I'm a Doctor Who fan and I want to look into Doctor Who. But if I've got the choice of watching Coronation Street or Ghostlight Part 2, it's difficult, isn't it? As for a casual viewer, you're not going to be like, so hang on, let's just clarify. Why are they sending them to Java? Why is he pretending that he's that? Why is he half ape man? Why is there a husband? And it's all this stuff going on, and it's fine. And as I say, I understand the story. I'm not, basic. I understand the get-on. But as a viewer, I think it fails as a Doctor Who story because it's not asking you to have a basic story that are layers around it. It's asking you to look at all the layers and try and work out what's good. And I don't think, without going very hard into following it, and like James said about watching extra scenes and things like that, unless you work at it and work around it and do your homework. I mean, even the cast, the amount of cast members we've had come through the doors and said, "Oh, I love doing Doctor Who. I didn't have a clue what it was about." And the cast working on it, that's the cast who did rehearse it, did record it, and all that, didn't know what was going on in it. So a casual viewer is going to fall down on that. They're not going to, you can't just watch it and go, "Oh, it's very easy." So I would say it does have a huge failing from that front, but 4 was a very strange and controversial move. And I would say it's probably more until 7.
Yeah, I like it, and I do agree with you in that respect, that particularly for the time where Doctor Who was at, because they were trying to kill it off, basically, to put it against something like Coronation Street, where you can pretty much pick it up. You can not watch it for 2 years, and apart from the odd character, you'll be like, "Who the hell's that?" You can carry on watching it because it's a serial drama, and that's what it's designed to allow people to jump on and off of it. If you had joined halfway through Ghostlight, you probably, if you watched it first time round on transmission, you were probably going, "What on earth's going on?" It's interesting now that we're in the streaming age. If this came out, I can imagine people wanting to watch all 3 episodes, at one sitting, so that they could try and understand what was going on without the week in between, where you were sort of like puzzled and confused by the end of the first episode. Then you had to wait until the next episode, by which time you'd be like, "What happened in the first one?" But I think it is very clever with what it tries to do. It may not necessarily pull off everything that it's trying to do, but it is Doctor Who in a very different way. It's very dark. You see the Doctor openly manipulating Ace, taking her back to somewhere where she already had, sort of fears about, and she clocks that sort of, during the first episode or so, and is really sort of angry with him for what he's done. But he's just like, "Yeah, but it's all part of your initiation," and blah 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 blah. It's a really, really cruel thing to do, to make her to go through that. But I think the cast around that. I mean, Sylvia Sim, who sadly passed away very, very recently, as Mrs. Pritchard, isn't it? It's just like really sinister. There's some really dark characters in here as well, and I just think it's quite. I enjoy watching this. Really, and try not to get too sort of bolted down with some of the bigger concepts at play, but it is something really nice to watch, and it's very different. And if you put this compared to the other 2 stories that we have talked about, they are streets apart.
Cool.
Hang on. If you talk about the streets apart, you scored Time on the Run the exact same as Ghostlight, so they can't be that far apart.
And do you know what? In the same way that you were saying about your scores, I would say, for me, this is a nostalgia period, and I think I said that in the original recordings, because these are the episodes that were on when I was at school, and we talked about them the day after, or we played scenes from different Sylv stories. So there is a nostalgia feeling for me when I watch these episodes in particular. But when you do stack them up, yes, the scoring isn't where it should be, and this is in a different season to the ones that we watched, and I was scoring it on the basis of the season. And there are stories now in classic Who, having gone through, I think, probably the biggest thing was like season 20, but then season 6, and there are stories now where, in hindsight, I actually would change my scores, and I'd actually score this higher than I scored it last time, and I would score the other 2 slightly lower.
Would you change your score for the Dalek Master Plan by any chance?
No.
Okay, but you're right. different seasons command different things out of the way that we've reviewed them, and we've reviewed them at different times, and we've reviewed them against what we're watching at that time rather than a story we've watched in a different season. I'm going to go with it. These are chalk and cheese. This is chalk and cheese compared to, you know, the other two stories we've just talked about in this video. It did go over the heads of some people, and it does take a number of watches, and it's not one of those what you would call the casual sit down and watch Doctor Who kind of story. At this stage, Doctor Who was in a much darker phase. It was trying not to be just a children's program. It had some sort of idea that it was more focused to an older age group rather than the very young age group. And that was down to perhaps Cartmell's influence at that time, the way that it had moved, whatever it might have been. There were a number of things that were going on. We'd come out of Eric's script tenure and we went darker. But I wouldn't score this any differently now in hindsight. You know, potentially, you know, it might have been my lowest score for this season, but it was given in that spirit for that reason. I stand by where I was at with it, but you're right. There could be other stories in other seasons I could have scored differently, but I'll score them in context of the season I'm in.
I disagree. I've never scored within the context of the season. I score within the context of it's a mark out of 10 for that story as a rule. So my benchmark is at 5 is an average and 10's outstanding, you know, 0, 1 is rubbish. So whilst I am saying my 4 for Ghostlight is a bit strange, I don't look back at the other scores actually for any of these and think, oh, that's horrendous. I shouldn't have given that. The time in the Rhino I gave a 7. I think it isn't above average. Right? I like it. There's lots of things I do like about it. I think my other sort of bugbears. I gave a 5 to Paradise Towers and a 5 to Greatest Show. Because again, I just said, I went quite full on. I didn't like go to British Galaxy, apart from liking the Chief Clown. So it's kind of like I don't. I mean, each to their own how this rolls and things. But I would say that my scores are all very much how it rolls. Mm. It's true. I fessed up. I'm not fessing up twice. They're doing great. They're doing Chief Clown impressions. I'm having none of it.
I can't wait till we do a review of the Tom Baker best and worst.
Yeah, we still only be 3 and 3. We're not subsectioning it. Okay, right. Let's get what's going to happen now. I want you to award 3 points to your favourite, 2 to your second, 1 point to your least favourite. We will see what we decree to be the worst McCoy story, and then I don't know, maybe send a message to Sue Molden. She could get it wiped or something.
Don't tell Ian whatever you do.
Then it'll come back as the telly snap, and then I'll give it a 10.
Oh no! And then I'll put the meddling monk in the background, and
we'll have the odd quark disappearing in and out there.
The recursive occlusion.
What's quite interesting here actually is that we've already scored these. This will be the first time Ben's scoring against some of these, so he actually could change the outcome of what we thought was or is the bottom or the top. So this is kind of an. You
did just say that Paradise Towers is one of the worst Doctor Who stories ever. So I'm not sure. That's going to mix this up.
But it might do at some point.
Okay, go on. Let's go. Ben, where are you at? Let's have your 3, 2, 1.
My 3, 2, 1.
Been there in the corner.
Ted Rogers, there's a blast.
Yes, exactly. All right. So just to make sure, just to clarify this here. So, so I'm telling you my absolute worst of this one.
No. 3 points is your favourite story from this set. 2 points is your middle. 1 point will go to your least favourite story. It will have the lowest score.
Good. Okay, cool. Right. So 3 points to Ghostlight.
Yeah.
2 points to Time in the Rani. And a measly little 1 point for Paradise Towers.
Oh, that's a shock.
Yeah, really? That's really surprised me as that.
That's high fabtion, that is. You're making the story unalive.
Good.
This is like the shifting sands right in front of our eyes.
Go on then, Jason. Let's have your wit and wisdom. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so I've got my piece of paper here because I want to get these right because obviously I've already messed one score up and I wouldn't want to do that again. Okay, so my favorite of the bottom 3 that I would want to be at the top and not the bottom. We're all getting used to a new format, folks, so bear with us. I am giving my 3 points to Ghostlight because it deserves the 3 points and should never have been in the bottom 3.
I honestly
one more time for the record there.
I honestly
That's waiver 3 for Paradise Towers then.
I got this right. I've locked these in. What are you saying, James?
2 points for Delta and the Bannermen because it's near Cardiff.
No, I wouldn't, because I'm very, very happy that Delta and the Bannermen, I have very fond memories of Delta and the Bannermen, as you'll recall from when we did the recording, that I went on holiday many a time to Barry Island and stayed in the Butlins. So I've got a lot of time for it. So no, I'm
Sorry, if anyone on there talking about bingo cards got Jason mentioning living in Wales, you can tick it off now.
Boom, we're all over it. Right. My second and receiving my 2 points in this instance, I feel like I am in the Eurovision here. I'm loving this.
You are
2
like one of
points.
those that's got the clipboards and don't take the time.
I've got my pad here. I'm all over this. My 2 points is going to Paradise Towers. Okay, because I don't think I'm staying with my original listings here. I scored Paradise Towers a 6. I scored Time and Irani a 5. I scored Ghostlight a 7 initially. So 2 for Paradise Towers. And my 1, therefore, can't build the tension anymore on this, has to go to, I'm afraid, Time and Irani. And that remains my least favorite of the McCoy era.
And that was the votes from Cardiff. The
Honestly.
presenter would have been there going, no.
Katie Boyle learned her dosh, didn't she? Right, James, where are you at on your scores?
So, unsurprisingly, I think you'll realise Ghostlight gets my 3 points. And then I'm going to go Time of the Rani for 2 and Paradise Towers for 1.
It's very exciting stuff, isn't it? So actually, my scores, I would give Ghostlight the 3 points, Time and the Rani the 2, and Paradise Towers 1. Which actually only slightly changes things in the grand scheme, but it does mean from our selection, we are ruling Paradise Towers to be the worst Sylvester McCoy story. We ain't building eye for happiness round here.
It's been taken through the waste disposal.
Although I do always think of that Paradise Towers being a bit like where Jason lives.
No.
He's definitely a resi.
He is a resi because he's. Anyway, we won't go into all that. But yeah,
we won't. We've done that in the first video. Go back and look if you want to see the gags on that one.
So when Jason walks past the lift, is he here? Hungry.
No, that's Jason. He's on his way out for something to eat.
that's when he walks past someone with a man bun. He usually does that.
No, please, enough. No. Is this the new X-rated version of Talking About? Is it?
Anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen. We have now confirmed our least favourite Sylvester McCoy story. I mean, just before we do sign off here, is there anything that anyone would suggest was worse than that didn't make it into our bottom 3? I mean, is there a massive hater here for Battlefield or something? Or are we happy with that as our worst McCoy?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely the worst McCoy.
Yeah, either that or Time and the Rani. I would have taken either of those two as my bottom, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen.
A
Thank you.
pleasure, as always.
Thank you.
Oh, trying to get the camera back, but thank you very much.
Well, brilliant. Don't forget to like us, subscribe to us, get a notification, and we'll see you soon.